The chamber was silent, except for the soft hum of the translation devices. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the podium, her hands clasped behind her back, waiting. Around her, the Galactic Council sat in their designated sections. 12 different species, each representing thousands of years of civilization. And then there was humanity, barely 40 years old in galactic terms. Elena had prepared for this meeting carefully. The Zakros Imperium had filed a complaint, and she knew exactly what it was about. The human colony on Threshold 7, New Sarajevo. 800,000 people who had followed every rule, filed every form, and waited for approval before settling on that world. The Zakros representative entered the chamber. Supreme Commander Karthos was massive, nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and skin that looked like gray armor plates. His species had ruled their territory for 3,000 years through military might. They were warriors, proud and fierce. "The humans have invaded our territory," Karthos announced without greeting. His voice boomed through the chamber, needing no translation device. "The Threshold sector belongs to the Zakros Imperium. It has been our hunting ground for generations." Elena remained calm. She had expected this. "Supreme Commander, the Threshold sector was listed as unclaimed space in the Galactic Registry. Humanity followed all proper protocols. We filed our claim, waited the required period, and received council approval. New Sarajevo has existed for 3 years without any challenge." "Paperwork means nothing," Karthos said, slamming one of his 4 fists on the railing. "Strength determines ownership. The weak file papers. The strong take what is theirs." The council members shifted in their seats. This was unusual. Most disputes were handled through quiet diplomacy. Public confrontations were rare. Archon Vel, the eldest member of the council, spoke up. His species, the Luminari, were beings of pure energy contained in crystalline forms. "Supreme Commander Karthos, the rules are clear. If you had a claim to the Threshold sector, you should have filed it centuries ago. The humans have done nothing wrong." "Then the rules are for cowards," Karthos replied. He turned to face Elena directly. "I give you one choice, human. Remove your colony within 1 standard cycle. Evacuate every person from Threshold 7. If you do not, the Zakros Imperium will remove them for you." Elena took a slow breath. She had been a diplomat for 15 years, ever since humanity joined the galactic community. She had handled difficult negotiations before, but this was different. This was a direct threat against human civilians. "We cannot evacuate 800,000 people in 1 cycle," she said carefully. "Even if we wanted to, it would take months. Perhaps we could discuss a compromise. The Threshold sector has 47 planets. Surely we could share the space." Karthos laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Humans. So quick to bargain, so eager to avoid conflict. "This is why your species will never be respected in the galaxy. You have no spine." He walked down from his section toward Elena. The council chamber had strict rules about personal space, about maintaining diplomatic distance. Karthos ignored them all. He came right up to Elena, towering over her. "Let me make this simple for your weak mind," he said, looking down at her. "Leave our territory, or we will cleanse it. The Zakros Imperium has 5,000 warships. How many do you have, human? 300? 400? 312, Elena said quietly. Pathetic. Karthos raised one of his hands. "You are not even worth the fuel to reach your colony." Then he did something that made every council member freeze. He struck Elena across the face with the back of his hand. The blow sent her stumbling backward. She caught herself on the podium, her hand going to her face. Blood ran from her split lip. The chamber erupted. Council members shouted in a dozen different languages. Security protocols activated. But But Karthos simply stood there, looking satisfied. "By the ancient laws of challenge, I have declared war on humanity," he announced. "The Zakros Imperium will cleanse the threshold sector. Your colony will burn. And when we are done, perhaps you humans will learn your place in the galaxy." He turned and walked out of the chamber, his delegation following behind him. The doors sealed shut with a heavy sound. Elena straightened up slowly. She took a cloth from her pocket and pressed it to her bleeding lip. Her hands did not shake. Her expression did not change. She simply stood there, watching the door where Karthos had left. Archonvel floated down to her level. "Ambassador Vasquez, are you injured? Should we call medical assistance?" "I'm fine," Elena said. Her voice was steady. "This is unprecedented," Archonvel continued. "Physical violence in the council chamber has not occurred in 4,000 years. We will condemn this action. We will demand an apology. We will, with respect, Archon, you will do nothing," Elena interrupted. She lowered the cloth from her face. The bleeding had already stopped. "Karthos has declared war. That is his right under galactic law, isn't it?" "Technically, yes, but then humanity will respond according to our rights as well." Elena looked up at the other council members, who were still standing, still talking amongst themselves in shocked tones. "I need to send a message to Earth. How long until the Zakros fleet reaches the threshold sector?" "At maximum speed, approximately 15 standard days," one of the council members replied. 15 days, Elena repeated. She picked up her datapad and began typing. "That should be enough time." Archonvel's crystalline form flickered with concern. "Ambassador, please consider carefully. The Zakros Imperium is powerful. They have crushed many species in the past. Perhaps if you issued an apology, if you agreed to pay reparations." "No." Elena's voice cut through the chamber like a knife. For the first time, her diplomatic mask slipped. Her eyes, when she looked at Archonvel, were cold and hard. "Karthos made a mistake today. A very, very big mistake." "What do you mean?" Elena touched her split lip again, looking at the blood on her fingers. "He thought humanity was weak because we prefer peace. He thought we were cowards because we follow rules. He thought we would run because we are outnumbered." She looked back at the Archon. "He was wrong about all of those things. Ambassador, you must understand." "No, Archon. You must understand." Elena gathered her materials and prepared to leave. "You should pull up humanity's file. The complete file, including the sections marked classified. Read it carefully. Read about our history. Read about what we did to ourselves before we ever left our own planet. And then you'll understand why Karthos just made the worst decision of his life." She walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the quiet chamber. "Ambassador Vasquez," Archonvel called after her. "What are you going to do?" Elena stopped at the door. She didn't turn around. "I'm going to remind the galaxy," she said quietly, "why humanity survived on a death world for 200,000 years. Why we climbed to the top of our food chain. And why you should never, ever threaten our children." The door closed behind her, leaving the council members in shocked silence. Archonvel immediately accessed the human file, the one that had caused so much debate when Earth applied for council membership. The file that had nearly gotten humanity rejected. He began to read, and with each page, his crystalline form dimmed with growing horror. Commander Karthos stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Fang, and watched the stars streak past. Behind him, 2,000 Zakros warships traveled in formation. It was the largest battle fleet assembled in 3 centuries. More than enough to destroy one pathetic human colony. "Status report," he commanded. His tactical officer, a younger warrior named Drexus, checked the displays. We will reach the threshold sector in 12 standard hours. Our scouts report minimal human defensive presence. 30 ships, mostly light cruisers and frigates. 1 orbital defense platform around the colony world. 30 ships. Carthos laughed. They don't even try to defend themselves properly. This will be over in hours. Drexus hesitated. Commander, there is something strange. The human ships are not retreating. They are moving to intercept us. Good. Let them come. It will save us the trouble of hunting them down. But as the hours passed, Carthos began to notice something odd about the human formations. They were not behaving like prey. Most species, when faced with overwhelming force, either ran or tried to negotiate. The humans did neither. They advanced, but slowly, drawing the Zakros fleet deeper into the asteroid belt that surrounded Threshold 7. It's a trap, Drexus said suddenly. Commander, we should pull back and reassess. A trap? With 30 ships? Carthos scoffed. Impossible. They barely have enough vessels to crew 1 patrol line. Continue forward. The first explosion came from the asteroid field itself. A Zakros destroyer simply vanished in a ball of fire. Then another. And another. Mines! Someone shouted. The asteroids are full of mines. But they weren't just mines. As the Zakros fleet tried to pull back, the asteroids themselves began moving. Human ships had been hiding inside hollowed-out rocks, using power signatures masked by the natural radiation of the belt. They emerged now, firing weapons at point-blank range. The human tactics were vicious. They didn't engage in honorable ship-to-ship combat. They used small, fast ships loaded with explosives that rammed into Zakros vessels. They deployed thousands of tiny drones that swarmed larger ships, cutting through hulls with molecular saws. And worst of all, they used nuclear weapons in space combat. Carthos watched in horror as a human frigate, badly damaged and burning, accelerated directly toward one of his capital ships. The Zakros crew tried to shoot it down, but it was too fast, too determined. At the last second, the human ship detonated its reactor. The nuclear explosion took out not just the capital ship, but 3 destroyers nearby. Fall back. Carthos ordered. Reform at the outer marker. But the humans had predicted this too. As the Zakros fleet retreated, they found more mines, more hidden ships, more traps. The asteroid belt had been turned into a massive killing field, and the humans had spent 3 years preparing it docked. By the time the Zakros fleet limped to safety, they had lost 300 ships. 300 ships destroyed by a force 1/10 their size. Carthos stared at the tactical display, unable to believe what had happened. His species had fought hundreds of battles. They knew war. They understood strategy. But this was something different. Something wrong. Get me a communication channel with the human forces, he demanded. A face appeared on the screen. A human woman wearing a military uniform. She had short gray hair and sharp eyes. Behind her, Carthos could see the bridge of her ship, damaged and smoking, but still operational. I am Admiral Chun of the Terran Defense Fleet, she said calmly. You wanted to talk, Commander Carthos? What kind of warfare is this? Carthos demanded. You use weapons that destroy your own ships. You fight without honor. We fight to win, Admiral Chun interrupted. You came here to kill our civilians. Did you expect us to line up our ships nicely so you could shoot them one by one? This is not how civilized species conduct war. You're right. It's not. Admiral Chun leaned forward, and Carthos saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. But you didn't declare war on a civilized species, Commander. You declared war on humanity. And we have a very different understanding of what war means. The communication cut off. Carthos stood there, trembling with rage and something he had never felt before in battle. Fear, While this was happening, back on Earth, a very different scene was unfolding. The Galactic Council had sent a delegation to meet with human leadership. They arrived at the United Terran Government headquarters in Geneva, expecting diplomatic discussions. Instead, they found a war council. The human leaders sat around a table covered in tactical displays and fleet readiness reports. Every major nation had sent representatives. Every colony had sent delegates. And they were not discussing how to negotiate peace. They were discussing how to mobilize for total war. "Gentlemen, ladies," the council delegate began nervously. He was a Pelthian, a species that resembled upright rabbits. "We understand you are upset by Commander Karthus's actions. But surely we can find a peaceful resolution. The council is prepared to offer mediation services." The Secretary General of Earth, an elderly man from India named Raj Kumar, looked at the delegate with tired eyes. "With respect, Ambassador, the time for mediation ended when Karthus struck our representative and declared war. We did not want this. We tried to avoid it. But now that it has begun, we will see it through. But the Zakros have 5,000 ships. You have only 300. "Had 300, Kumar corrected. "We have been building. Did you really think that was our entire fleet? We learned long ago never to show all our strength." The Pelthian delegate's ears drooped in confusion. "What do you mean?" Kumar stood up and walked to a large display on the wall. He pressed a button, and the screen lit up with images of massive shipyards hidden in the Oort cloud, in asteroid belts, in dark space between stars. "We have been building ships since we joined the galactic community," Kumar explained. "Not because we wanted war, but because we remembered our own history. We remembered what happened to civilizations that were unprepared when enemies came. We swore it would never happen to us again." The display showed numbers that made the council delegates gasp. Thousands of ships. Tens of thousands. All hidden, all waiting, all ready. "This is madness," the Pelthian whispered. "Why would you build such a fleet if you did not plan to use it?" "Because we hoped we would never need to," Kumar replied. "But hope is not a strategy. Preparation is." Another delegate, a luminary, spoke up. "Secretary General, surely you don't plan to actually fight this war. The cost in lives, in resources. 200,000 of our civilians are on New Sarajevo," Kumar interrupted. His voice was hard. 200,000 men, women, and children who followed our rules, who trusted us to protect them. Commander Karthus is bringing 2,000 ships to exterminate them. To cleanse them, as he put it. He looked at each council delegate in turn. "What would you have us do? Abandon them? Apologize for existing in space we legally claimed?" The Pelthian tried again. "But if you escalate, if you fight back, thousands more will die. Perhaps millions. Would it not be wiser to evacuate New Sarajevo and avoid the conflict?" Kumar's expression didn't change, but his next words sent chills through every delegate in the room. "If we abandon New Sarajevo, we teach the galaxy that threatening human civilians is an effective strategy. We teach every species that humans will run when confronted. We teach our own children that we cannot protect them." He shook his head slowly. "No, we will not abandon our people. We will defend them. And if the Zakros want war, we will give them war like they have never seen." The meeting ended shortly after. As the delegates left, one of them, a Korath observer who had remained silent throughout, spoke to his companion. "I have studied human history," he said quietly. "Their world wars, their genocides, their weapons of mass destruction. And do you know what frightens me most?" "What?" his companion asked. "They did all of that to themselves, to their own species, over ideologies, over resources, over territory on their own planet." The Korath looked back at the building. "What do you think they will do to an enemy species that threatens their children?" His companion had no answer. Back in the threshold sector, Admiral Chun received the priority message from Earth. It was simple, just one line of text. But when she read it to her crew, they erupted in cheers. "The fleet is coming," she announced. "Hold the line for 5 more days. The fleet is coming." And across human space, in every colony, on every station, on every ship, the same message was spreading. A call to arms. A battle cry. A promise. Remember, New Sarajevo. Commander Kartos had regrouped his fleet. Despite the losses in the asteroid belt, he still had overwhelming numbers. 1,700 ships against the 30 battered human vessels that remained. The humans had fought well, he admitted grudgingly, but they could not win. "Prepare for orbital bombardment," he ordered. "Target the population centers first. Show them the price of resistance." The Zakros fleet moved into position above Threshold 7. The planet was beautiful from space, with blue oceans and green continents. New Sarajevo could be seen as a cluster of lights on the largest continent. 800,000 humans living their lives, unaware that death was about to rain from the sky. The planetary shields activated, a shimmering dome of energy that covered the colony. Zakros weapons fired, massive energy beams that could crack mountains. The shields held for the first hour, then the second. But nothing could withstand that much firepower forever. On the third hour, the shields failed. Karthos watched on his display as his weapons found their targets. Buildings collapsed. Streets burned. The lights of the city began to go dark, section by section. He felt satisfaction in his victory, but also something else. A nagging doubt. When the bombardment finally stopped, the casualty reports came in. 200,000 dead. The rest had made it to underground shelters, but they were trapped. Karthos could finish them whenever he wanted. "Send a message to Earth," he commanded. "Tell them their colony is destroyed. Tell them this is what happens when they defy the Zakros Imperium. And tell them they have one last chance to surrender." The message was sent. The response came faster than expected, but it was not a surrender. Across human space, every ship, every station, every outpost received the news simultaneously. New Sarajevo had fallen. 200,000 civilians were dead. The images came through on every screen: burning buildings, bodies in the streets, children crying in the rubble. On Earth, in the civilian districts, people stopped what they were doing and watched. In the military bases, soldiers stood at attention, silent tears running down their faces. On the colony worlds, families held each other and grieved. And then, as if by some unspoken signal, they all began to move. Freighter captains volunteered their ships for military service. Retired soldiers reported for duty. Scientists abandoned their research to work on weapons. Factory workers switched from making consumer goods to making ammunition. It happened in every human settlement, on every world, in every station. The transformation from a peaceful civilization to a war machine took less than a day. The Galactic Council watched this mobilization with growing alarm. They called an emergency session and invited Elena Vasquez to attend. She arrived with her face still bruised from Karthus's strike, but her eyes were clear and cold. "Ambassador Vasquez," Archamvel began carefully, "we have received disturbing reports. Your species appears to be mobilizing for total war. Surely this is an overreaction. Commander Karthos has agreed to a ceasefire while we negotiate. Has he released our people from the shelters?" Elena interrupted. "Well, no, but has he withdrawn his fleet from Threshold 7? Not yet, but given time, then there is nothing to negotiate." Elena placed a data chip on the table. "This is humanity's official response to the Zakros Imperium's act of war." Archanvel picked up the chip with trembling appendages. He loaded it into the Council's display system. What appeared made several council members physically recoil. It was titled Declaration of Extermination. The document was brief and precise. It stated that the Zakros Imperium had committed an act of genocide against human civilians. In response, humanity was invoking its right under galactic law to defend itself by any means necessary. The Zakros Imperium would be given one opportunity to surrender unconditionally. If they refused, humanity would prosecute the war until the Zakros species was extinct. "This is barbaric," a council member shouted. "You cannot exterminate an entire species." "Why not?" Elena asked calmly. "They attempted to exterminate our colony. They killed 200,000 civilians, including 40,000 children. Are you saying we should forgive this? Are you saying we should negotiate with people who murder our children?" The proportional response. The Pelthian delegate protested. Galactic law requires proportional response. You cannot escalate to extinction. Elena's laugh was bitter. Proportional? They tried to wipe out an entire colony. We are simply promising to do the same to them. That seems very proportional to me. Archanvel tried to regain control of the meeting. "Ambassador, please. I have been reading your species file. Your history is troubling, but surely you have evolved past such violence. Surely you understand that genocide is wrong, no matter the provocation." "Of course we understand it's wrong," Elena said quietly. "We've committed it ourselves, against our own people, multiple times in our history. We know exactly how wrong it is. That's why we're so good at it." The chamber fell silent. Elena continued, her voice steady. "You want to know about human history? Fine, let me educate you. In our 20th century, we killed over 100 million of our own species in wars. We invented weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We built enough nuclear bombs to kill every living thing on Earth 70 times over. And we pointed them at ourselves for 50 years, ready to push the button at any moment." She stood up, walking around the council chamber as she spoke. "We fought wars that lasted years. We sieged cities until people ate rats to survive. We burned our own cities rather than let our enemies have them. We invented poison gas, biological weapons, atomic bombs. And we used all of them against ourselves." "That was your past," Archanvel said desperately. "You have grown since then. You have changed, have we?" Elena turned to face him. "Or have we simply learned to control it? To aim it outward instead of inward?" She returned to her seat. "You species evolved from prey animals. When you're threatened, your instinct is to run, to hide, to negotiate. We evolved from predators, from hunters. When we're threatened, our instinct is to attack, to fight, to kill whatever threatens us." A Korath delegate, the same one who had studied human history, spoke up. "But you also show remarkable compassion. You have strict laws protecting civilians. You provide aid even to your enemies. How do you reconcile these contradictions?" "It's not a contradiction," Elena replied. "We separate the war from the peace. During war, we fight without mercy because half measures get our people killed. But we don't enjoy it. We don't glorify it. We remember every person who dies, every city that burns, every child who cries. And when the war is over, we make sure it never happens again." She pulled up images on the display. "After our Second World War, we created international laws. We established war crime tribunals. We built institutions to prevent future conflicts. We turned our worst enemies into our closest allies. Germany and Japan, who we fought to near extinction, are now among our most important partners." She looked around the chamber. "We can make peace. We're very good at making peace. But first, we have to win the war." Archanvel accessed more of the human file. What he found disturbed him deeply. During Earth's Cold War, humanity had developed something called mutually assured destruction. The idea that if one side attacked, the other would retaliate with enough force to destroy both sides completely. And they lived that way for decades. "This makes no sense," he muttered. "Why would you create a system that guaranteed mutual extinction?" "Because it worked," Elena answered. She had heard him, despite his low voice. "For 50 years, we had the power to destroy ourselves. And we didn't. Because both sides knew that any war would end in total annihilation. So instead of fighting, we talked. We negotiated. We found other ways to compete." "But you're not using that strategy now," another delegate pointed out. "You're threatening to exterminate the Zakros." "Because they don't have the weapons to exterminate us," Elena explained. "Mutually assured destruction only works when both sides have equal power to destroy each other. The Zakros are strong, but they can't kill all of us. We, however, can kill all of them. And we will, unless they surrender." The meeting devolved into arguments and debates, but Elena had said what she came to say. She left the council chamber and returned to the human delegation headquarters. Her second-in-command, Marcus Way, was waiting with reports. "The fleet is ready," he said. 5,000 ships with another 3,000 in reserve. We're 5 times larger than our public declaration suggested." "Good," Elena said. "What about the new weapons?" Marcus hesitated. "The research division has completed the project. They're calling it the relativistic kill vehicle. It's a missile that accelerates to 90% light speed. The kinetic energy alone would be enough to crack a planet's crust. Have we tested it? On an uninhabited moon in the Oort cloud. The moon no longer exists." Elena sat down heavily. The weight of what humanity was about to do pressed down on her. "We're really going to do this, aren't we? We're going to fight a war of extermination." "Only if they don't surrender," Marcus reminded her gently. "Will they surrender? Would we, in their position?" Marcus didn't answer. They both knew the truth. Humanity would fight to the last person rather than surrender unconditionally. The Zakros probably felt the same way. Elena touched her bruised face, feeling the ache in her jaw where Karthos had struck her. "They thought we—" The human fleet arrived at the edge of Zakro space like a storm. 5,000 ships, each one broadcasting the same message. "Surrender or die." Commander Karthos received the transmission on his flagship. He had been expecting a counterattack, but not this. Not a fleet that outnumbered his remaining forces 3-1. Where had they been hiding all these ships? "This is Admiral Chun of the Terran Defense Fleet," the message began. "You have 72 hours to release all human prisoners from New Sarajevo. Withdraw your forces from the Threshold sector and present yourself for trial on war crimes. If you refuse, we will consider every Zakros military installation a legitimate target." Karthos deleted the message without responding. Surrender was not in the Zakros' vocabulary. He would fight to the last ship if necessary. But what happened over the next weeks was not a battle. It was a systematic dismantling of everything the Zakros Imperium had built. The humans did not fight with honor. They did not challenge Zakros ships to fair combat. They did not follow the traditional rules of warfare that the galaxy had maintained for centuries. They fought like predators hunting prey. First came the cyber attacks. Human hackers, using techniques that violated 3 different galactic treaties on electronic warfare, broke into Zakros communication networks. They didn't just gather intelligence. They broadcast messages directly into Zakros ships. Messages designed to break morale. Zakros crews found their personal files accessed, their private communications exposed. They received videos of their home worlds, their families, with text messages asking, "Is this worth dying for? Do you really want your children to grow up without you?" One Zakros captain reported that his entire Bridge crew mutinied after receiving images of their specific family members with captions like, "Your daughter just turned 5. Do you want to see her turn 6? The psychological warfare was brutal and effective. Dozens of Zakros ships simply stopped fighting, their crews unable to continue when faced with such personal attacks. Then came the biological weapons. A Zakros outpost in the Krull system reported that their entire garrison had fallen ill. Not dead, but incapacitated. They couldn't stand, couldn't see properly, couldn't fight. Medical officers were baffled until they discovered microscopic drones in the air filtration systems, releasing a gas specifically tailored to Zakros biology. The gas was not lethal. It simply made fighting impossible. And that was somehow worse. The Zakros warriors could do nothing but lie in their beds while human ships destroyed their orbital defenses and moved on to the next target. The Galactic Council sent frantic messages to humanity, protesting these tactics. Elena Vasquez's response was simple. "We're not killing them." Isn't that what you wanted? For us to show mercy? But the worst was yet to come. A Zakros battle fleet, defending the industrial colony of Draxus Prime, received a challenge from a human ship. It was an old tradition among Zakros warriors single combat between commanders to decide the outcome of a battle. The human captain accepted. The Zakros commander, a veteran warrior named Thoros, prepared his personal fighter for the duel. He launched from his ship, expecting the human captain to do the same. Instead, the human ship fired every weapon it had at Thoros' flagship. The entire Zakros bridge crew died in seconds. The flagship broke apart, and the rest of the fleet fled in confusion. The human captain sent a message to the survivors. "We stopped settling wars with single combat 3,000 years ago. Welcome to modern warfare." Theros, a Zakros philosopher soldier, witnessed this battle from one of the surviving ships. He began to understand something that terrified him. The humans were not just fighting a war. They were teaching a lesson. Every battle demonstrated a new human tactic. Every engagement showed a different way that traditional warfare was obsolete. The humans were showing the galaxy that the old rules, the old honor codes, the old ways of fighting, none of it mattered when facing a species that wrote new rules. But then something strange happened. At a colony world called Sharos, where 15 million Zakros civilians lived, the human fleet arrived and did not open fire. Instead, they broadcast an evacuation order. All non-combatants have 48 hours to evacuate to designated safe zones, Admiral Chun announced. Any ship carrying only civilians will be allowed to leave unmolested. "We are here to destroy military targets, not murder families." The Zakros military commander at Sharos didn't believe it. It had to be a trick. But as civilian ships began to launch, human vessels actually escorted them to safety. They protected Zakros civilians from their own military's attempt to use them as shields. Theros watched this with growing confusion. The humans fought without mercy against soldiers, but they went out of their way to protect non-combatants. They used psychological warfare and biological weapons, but they evacuated civilians before destroying military installations. They were ruthless and compassionate at the same time. He requested a communication with one of the human ship captains. To his surprise, they accepted. The human who appeared on his screen was a woman named Captain Rodriguez. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes, but her gaze was steady. "Why?" Theros asked simply. "Why do you protect our civilians while destroying our military? Why do you separate the two?" Captain Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "Because they're not the same thing," she finally said. "Your soldiers chose to fight. They attacked our colony, killed our people. They are the enemy. But your children? Your elderly? The people just trying to live their lives? They didn't choose this war. We won't punish them for your military's mistakes. But it would be easier to simply destroy everything, Theris pointed out. Strategically more efficient. Why do you make it harder on yourselves? Because we're not monsters, Rodriguez replied. We fight like demons when we have to, but we don't become demons. That's the difference between a soldier and a murderer. We know the difference, even if your commander doesn't. Theris thought about this. You are predators, he said slowly. We always knew humans evolved from hunters. But you are also prey, aren't you? You understand what it's like to be hunted. That's why you protect the helpless. Rodriguez smiled sadly. We're the prey that learned to hunt back. We remember what it was like to hide in caves from things that wanted to eat us. We remember what it was like to be the weak ones. So when we became strong, we promised ourselves we would protect the weak. Even enemy weak. The conversation ended, but it left Theris deeply troubled. His species had been warriors for thousands of years. They understood strength and courage and honor in battle. But the humans understood something deeper. They understood the cost of war. The human advance continued. Colony after colony fell. The Zakros military put up fierce resistance, but they were being systematically outmaneuvered, outhought, and overwhelmed. And always the humans evacuated civilians first. Theris began gathering other Zakros who felt as he did. Soldiers who were beginning to question whether this war was worth fighting. Officers who saw that they could not win. Philosophers who understood that their civilization was being destroyed for one commander's pride. They called themselves the Reasonable Faction. And they began to grow. Meanwhile, the human fleet reached the outer colonies of the Zakros core worlds. Here, the defenders fought with desperate courage. They knew that if these worlds fell, there was nothing between the humans and the Zakros homeworld itself. The Battle of Kethros Station was the last major engagement. 500 Zakros ships against 2,000 human vessels. The battle lasted 3 days. The Zakros fought with honor, bravery, and skill. They lost anyway. As the last Zakros defenders fled. Admiral Chun sent a message to Karthos, who was now on the Zakros homeworld, preparing for a final stand. Commander Karthos, this is your final warning. Surrender now. Release all human prisoners. Face trial for your crimes. Or we will demonstrate a weapon that will end this war permanently. Karthos's response was defiant. Come then, humans. Come to our homeworld. We will show you what true warriors can do when defending their own planet. We will drown you in our blood before we surrender. Admiral Chun sighed. She had hoped it wouldn't come to this. She sent an encrypted message back to Earth, to the Science Division. Prepare the RKV. We're out of options. The relativistic kill vehicle was humanity's ultimate weapon. A missile with minimal payload but enormous mass. Accelerated by a series of gravity assists and electromagnetic launchers until it reached 90% of light speed. At that velocity, it didn't need explosives. The kinetic energy alone was equivalent to a small asteroid impact. One RKV could create a crater hundreds of miles wide. It could trigger earthquakes across a continent. It could throw enough debris into the atmosphere to cause a temporary ice age. It was a planet killer. The Galactic Council, monitoring the situation, detected the weapon being moved into position. They contacted Elena Vasquez immediately. You cannot use that weapon on an inhabited world. Archon Vel pleaded. There are billions of Zakros on their homeworld. This would be genocide. Then tell Karthos to surrender, Elena replied calmly. We don't want to use it, but we will if we have to. This is madness. You're no better than him. You're right, Elena agreed. We're not better. We're just more effective. We told the galaxy what would happen if someone threatened our children. No one believed us. The message came through on all frequencies. Broadcasts from the Zakros homeworld to every human ship, every council station, every corner of the galaxy. This is Commander Karthos of the Zakros Imperium. His voice was heavy, defeated. I hereby surrender unconditionally to the human forces. All Zakros military units are ordered to stand down. All human prisoners will be released immediately. I accept responsibility for the deaths at New Sarajevo and submit myself for trial under galactic law. Admiral Chun received the message on her flagship. She looked at the countdown timer for the RKV launch. 15 minutes remained. She canceled the launch sequence. Stand down all weapons, she ordered. Begin humanitarian operations. Medical teams to New Sarajevo immediately. Prepare occupation forces for peaceful deployment. Around her, the bridge crew began to cheer, but Chun raised her hand for silence. We won the war, she said quietly. Now comes the hard part. We have to win the peace. On the Zakros homeworld, Karthos stood in his command center and watched as human ships entered orbit. Not attack ships this time, but transports. Medical vessels. Supply ships. They were coming not as conquerors, but as occupiers with a purpose. There stood beside him. What do you think they will do to us? The philosopher soldier asked. I don't know, Karthos admitted. With any other species, I would expect enslavement or extermination. But the humans? He trailed off, uncertain. The answer came within days. Human forces landed on Zakros worlds across the Imperium. But instead of the brutal occupation everyone expected, something different happened. Human military engineers began repairing damaged infrastructure. Human medical teams treated Zakros wounded, even enemy soldiers. Human supply ships brought food and medicine to colonies that had been cut off during the fighting. Theros was assigned as a liaison between the Zakros people and the human occupation forces. His first meeting was with a human colonel named James Morrison, a middle-aged man with gray hair and kind eyes. I don't understand, Theros said bluntly. You could destroy us. You have the power. Why do you help instead? Morrison smiled sadly. Because we remember our own history. After our Second World War, we had a choice. We could punish the nations we defeated, grind them into poverty and humiliation. Some people wanted that. But our leaders chose differently. They chose to help rebuild, to turn enemies into allies. And it worked. He pulled up images on a screen, photographs from Earth's history. Cities in ruins, then rebuilt. Former enemies working together. Children who had been taught to hate each other playing together in schools. We learned that you can win a war with weapons, Morrison explained, but you can only win a lasting peace with compassion. If we crush you now, your children will hate us forever. They'll grow up wanting revenge. But if we help you rebuild, if we show you that we're not monsters, then maybe their children and our children can live in peace. Theros studied the images. This is very strange to us. Zakros warriors believe that strength is all that matters. The strong rule, the weak submit. And how did that work out for you? Morrison asked gently. Theros had no answer. The war crimes trials began 3 months after the surrender. They were held not on Earth or a human colony, but on Concordia Prime, the neutral council station. The Galactic Council would judge, not humanity. Karthos stood trial for the massacre at New Sarajevo. The evidence was overwhelming: recordings, survivor testimony, forensic data. The humans presented their case with meticulous detail. Every death documented, every crime cataloged. But they did something unexpected. When it came time for sentencing recommendations, the human prosecutors asked for justice, not revenge. They requested that Karthos be imprisoned, not executed. They argued that making him a martyr would only inspire future violence. The council sentenced Karthos to 300 years in a rehabilitation facility. By galactic law, he would serve every day of it. But he would be treated humanely, given opportunities for education and reflection. Elena Vasquez attended the trial every day, sitting in the observer section. On the final day, as Carthos was led away, he stopped and looked at her. The scar on her lip from his strike was still visible. "I underestimated you," he said simply. "Yes," Elena replied. "You saw peace and thought weakness. You saw diplomacy and thought cowardice. You made the same mistake many species have made about humanity throughout our history." "What mistake is that?" Elena stood up to face him directly. "You confused our desire for peace with an inability to wage war. You thought we were soft because we didn't glorify violence. You didn't understand that a species that has fought itself for millennia knows the cost of war better than anyone. We don't avoid war because we fear it. We avoid it because we know exactly what we're capable of." Carthos nodded slowly. "I have had time to read your history. Your world wars. Your weapons. Your capacity for destruction." He paused. "But also your capacity for rebuilding. For forgiveness. For turning enemies into friends. This is what I did not understand. You are predators, yes. But you are also healers." "We are survivors," Elena corrected. "We do whatever is necessary to survive. Sometimes that means fighting. Sometimes that means healing. Sometimes both at the same time." 5 years passed. New Sarajevo was rebuilt, larger and more beautiful than before. A memorial stood in the center of the city, listing the names of all 200,000 who had died. Human and Zakros visited it together, mourning the dead, remembering the cost of pride and violence. The Zakros Imperium no longer existed. In its place was the Zakros Federation, a democratic government with representation for all colonies. Their military was reduced to system defense forces, but those forces trained alongside human soldiers, learning new tactics, sharing knowledge. Theras had become the Federation's first elected leader. He stood now at a ceremony on New Sarajevo, dedicating the memorial. Beside him stood Admiral Chun, retired now but present for this important moment. "We attacked you because we thought you were weak," Theras said in his speech. "We confused your civilization for softness. We thought your rules and laws made you vulnerable. We were wrong about everything." He gestured to the memorial. "These names are our shame, our reminder of the cost of arrogance. But they are also our teachers. They taught us that strength without wisdom is nothing. That honor without compassion is hollow. That being a warrior is not about how many you can kill, but about what you are willing to die for." Young Zakros soldiers stood in formation nearby. They wore uniforms that blended Zakros and human elements, symbolizing their new partnership. Many had human instructors, learning not just tactics but philosophy, the human understanding that the best warrior is the one who never has to fight. The Galactic Council had changed as well. Humanity now held a permanent seat, earned not through diplomacy but through demonstrated power. But more importantly, the Council had revised its policies on conflict resolution. The rules that had allowed the war to start were rewritten. Never again would junior species be left vulnerable to the aggression of elder powers. Elena Vasquez, now retired from active diplomacy, gave a lecture at the Galactic Institute on Species Relations. Her topic, "The Paradox of Human Nature." "We are predators who protect prey," she explained to the assembled students of a dozen different species. "We are warriors who build peace. We are capable of terrible violence and profound compassion. This is not a contradiction. It's a choice. Every day, every human chooses which part of our nature to embrace." A young Pelthian student raised a paw. "But how do we know which choice you will make? How can we trust that you won't attack us?" Elena smiled. "The same way we learn to trust each other on Earth, through relationship, through shared values, through mutual benefit. We don't ask you to trust that we're harmless. We ask you to trust that we choose cooperation over conflict when given the option." She pulled up images of Human and Zakros working together, building together, even laughing together. 5 years ago, we were at war. Today, our former enemies are our partners. This is the human way. We can destroy you if we must, but we would much rather work with you. And if someone attacks you again? Another student asked. What then? Elena's expression hardened. Then we remind them why you should never threaten humanity's children. We have proven we can wage war like no other species. But we have also proven we can make peace like no other species. The choice of which one you see is yours to make. The lecture ended, but students stayed to ask questions, to understand this strange species that had reshaped galactic politics in a single generation. That evening, Elena walked through New Sarajevo's rebuilt streets. She stopped at a playground where Human and Zakros children played together, their laughter filling the air. Their parents watched from benches, chatting in a mixture of languages. A Zakros elder approached her, moving slowly on aged limbs. Ambassador Vasquez? I wanted to thank you. For what? Elena asked. For not destroying us. When I heard that Karthos had attacked your colony, I was certain my species was doomed. I prepared to die. But you showed mercy. We showed justice, Elena corrected gently. Mercy would have been letting Karthos go free. Justice was holding him accountable while protecting innocents like you. The elder nodded. Still, thank you for teaching us a better way. My grandchildren now grow up in a democracy, with human friends, learning that strength,